All right. Moving on now to the next part of our program, wrapping up the day today. We're going to hear from one of our members, James Gaspard from Biochar Now, who is going to tell you about what they are doing in the biochar world.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a totally different crowd presenting to today. Last weekend, I presented at a conference at 10,000 cannabis and hemp growers. So today, we actually made it to lunch where I heard dude or bro. So it's a different crowd. I know, they didn't, yeah. No, but it's great. But appreciate the invitation to speak with you. Basically, Biochar Now, we've been doing this company for about 7 years. Okay, and we're a totally different company. If you Google biochar, you'll have over 1 million hits, and over 90% of that stuff is snake oil, and it's just, it's pretty scary what's out there on the internet. But especially for those people who believe everything on the internet's real. We have all the certifications. We had to patent our own system for production. We make basically a high-quality carbon. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I would have never called my product biochar. But at the time, I didn't know the industry was such a wild, wild west. We're actually the only biochar that's formally approved by the U.S. EPA to even release our product in the environment. So that kind of tells you the status of the industry when you got all these people claiming they're doing this, that, and the other thing, and we're actually the only one that's formally approved. And it's probably because most of them don't even know you're supposed to have approvals, but that's another story. We're in a lot of different markets, and this presentation is for water treatment and algae treatment. Okay, so we have different size products for different markets. This is a size product that we use in our water application. This is what our product starts to look like, electron microscope. We make it out of softwood. You can make it out of anything. We can make it out of hardwood, whatever. But for water treatment, pine or any softwood is best because when you get to the electron microscope level, you'll see there's a lot of macropores for large organic molecules. If you make char out of hardwood or nutshells or stuff, it just won't clean up certain water pollutants because they just won't fit in the pores. So our product basically is extremely clean. What makes it work in the water is we do a slow pyrolysis system, and we heat it at over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit in a vacuum environment for over 8 hours. So what we do is we literally we blow out all the tars and lignins and everything in there, and we transform the cellular structure into a graphene type structure. And we impart upon the wood the cation exchange property. So you can think of us as basically the easiest in this market would think of us sort of like as activated carbon or activated charcoal, but we have a cation exchange property on top of that. So we'll bind up molecules that the activated carbons won't touch. And I'll explain for the second life of the char, we're home for microbes and stuff, but I'll get to that in a minute. For phosphorus, we remove 99.9% of the phosphorus we come in contact with. That's something that most carbons won't do. We also can take up nitrates and ammonias and things like that, but for the algae removal, that's what's important for at least our application in algae removal. The nitrates will evaporate eventually, okay, but phosphorus bioaccumulates. So until you get the phosphorus actually out of the system, you're just going to have the legacy phosphorus you were talking, everybody spoken about earlier. We also hold almost 6 times our weight in water. So I sell my product by volume because most of the stuff you buy on the internet, if it's selling you by a pound, they're shipping you water. And their pores are all plugged with tars and lignins, most of them. We also take up heavy metals. Not on this, so we do mine reclamation work. We actually have a patent cleaning up mine water. But that's not this conference. We also, not on this list, we sorb mercury, more effective than we're doing a major project with DuPont, and we're cleaning up the South River which is here in this part of the world, and mercury pollution, South River, the Shenandoah River, to the Potomac River. So you're not supposed to eat fish anywhere for 300 miles. But we're being used to absorb the mercury out of the river with DuPont. And we also absorb PCBs, dioxins, pharmaceuticals, things that aren't on the list. But we've got the testing to show we absorb those things as well. Now, we're not a miracle worker. I mean, you know, like lithium, I mean, I only absorb 39% of that, so you don't want to use me to clean up lithium, unless you can't find anything better. But, you know, we're not the fit for everything. But for algae blooms, we do work. What you do, I'll get to the photos here in a minute. This was one lake I was just going to mention legacy phosphorus on. This was a couple 100-acre lake. We put socks in there, pulled the phosphorus out, and then the chart went down to pull the phosphorus, and then it had a massive spike. What happened, and then it pulled it out again. What happened with the massive spike was all the muck at the bottom remineralized. So the legacy phosphorus went back in the water, and we pulled that out. It's a very simple system. We just literally put the biochar in socks, hang the socks in the water column, and let the wind move it through. Now, if you have an aerator, fine, it moves it quicker. But it's pretty simple. You can't get much simpler than that. And as the water moves through the socks, it pulls the phosphorus out. It pulls other things, but the phosphorus is what's the important thing here. We have received a patent on this system. And then you just add more. I sell to lake treatment customers, the lake treatment companies, and we've done about, I think, we're probably getting close to 100 lakes so far, but we don't publicize what we do, and those customers don't my customers don't publicize. This is the first meeting I've been in any kind of water treatment organization, even let them know what we're up to. I mean, just today we shipped to 2 more reservoirs. So the word's getting out among the lake management community anyway. And then you take the bags out, and that removes the phosphorus out of the water, and you put more in, just continue the cycle till it's done. Like here's the dairy lagoon, cleared it up in 3 days. My problem as a capitalist is I can't, it doesn't take much. I mean, we clean this thing up for less than $200 in product. There's a lake in Denver area. It's a reservoir. I suggested they put 5 times more of my product in it than they did, so he decided he put $700 worth of product in there and cleared up a blue-green algae bloom in 3 days. Completely cleared it up. What he did, the mountains were over here, so he just put socks here. Instead of putting socks throughout the lake, he just put socks there because the prevailing winds push it that way, and the water made it through the socks in a couple of days, and that was it. So you see how the layout was. It's a pretty simple thing. We just literally put our char in a flow-through mesh, just drop it in the water with the float, and you put a weight at the other end where it just suspends in the column. That's it. You can't get much more low-tech than that. And then you just go pull the socks back out, and once the algae bloom disappears, and you work your product back into the landscaping. And that's where the cost effectiveness comes from. As I sell it to the customer, we'll either take the product back and resell it. I have 2 national lawn care companies that I sell to. I sell to a lot of specialty ag people, but the lawn care companies, first thing they do is rip the bag open and pour fertilizer on it, and then working in the landscaping. So this way, we're just naturally loading the char up with the nutrients and putting it back in the environment where it's supposed to be. Now, we have studies that show our char will not rinse out any of the nutrients. So we've put hundreds of inches of filtration water through the char, and it won't leach the nutrients. The nutrients are attracted by the plant roots through the cation exchange property in the plants. So you literally just put the char out there. You could do reservoirs. I'm negotiating with some major cities in California. The idea being if they can put the bags out there, they can do a marketing program with their local people that can buy a bag. Once you pull it back out, put it in your garden, your home garden, and they can actually make money on cleaning up their mess. A couple of quick studies to show you the benefit on the secondary market. So the idea is you put it out, you pull it back, and what are you going to do with it? You can give it back to me and I'll sell it, or you sell it yourself. And the benefits of the char, this was a Cornell study done. Now I admit they did it in poor soil, so if you're going to spike the results of a study, pick the poorest, the worst result, the worst soils. They planted 3 plots of maize. One, no fertilizer, no biochar. It was a clay soil, had no nutrients in it, and was rinsed out every day. No crop. You add commercial fertilizer, it produced a crop. You put 10% biochar in the root zone to bind the nutrients in the water in the root zone. They realized an 880% yield over the fertilizer crop. So we're not doing anything special. We're just binding up the nutrients and holding it in the root zone and keeping it from washing through. This was a study done by Morton Arboretum on urban trees in Chicago. You can see the biochar. In this case, they just threw it on the ground. They didn't even bother to work it into the soil. And they just let the winos and the earthworms figure out a way to get it down. But, and as I said, we have 2 of the top 4 lawn care companies we sell to currently and provide their char nationally. This was a test that was done just uniquely done. Like, we actually suppress diseases. There's been a lot of papers written on how this is done. I don't believe any of them, but I think we just make the plants healthy enough we grow through the disease. Rice University thinks we scramble the microbial signals of the viruses and the bacteria where they won't attack the plant. But either way, you pull up those plants, the roots are still rotted away. And we also, we can be used to remediate mine tailing piles. Or, if you had phosphorus piles or whatever, we just bind up the stuff on the surface and keep it from going. This was Aspen's water supply. This was a creek. This was an old tailing pile, over 100 years old. If you visited Aspen 5 years ago, I don't even want to tell you what you were drinking, but you're okay now. But it was leaching stuff that, it was bad. And we bind this stuff up now, and the grass was an afterthought. But it's a very simple concept. We've done many large lakes. We're doing larger lakes. We're ready to step up to very, very, very large projects. We have the market on the other side for the char. So that's where we're at. We can literally clean up a Lake Okeechobee or something like that for pennies on the dollar, but given we're capitalists, we'll take what we can get. Any questions?
You showed the removal efficiency for phosphorus. How effective is it with nitrate?
I believe it was in the, let's go back, 60s or 70s. Well, it depends. The ammonia was 89.7, nitrates was 64.3.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, but the nitrates, that'll eventually evaporate, is what I'm told. Now, you guys have more science in this area than I do. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And that data slide with the starting milligrams per liter of 284 for the orthophosphate, the middle row, left side.
Yeah.
Do you have a handle on what the absorptive capacity of the biochar is at that?
That's a problem too. We haven't reached breakthrough yet. The Corps of Engineers was trying to do some breakthrough studies because they want to use this at military bases, and they couldn't get the breakthrough. What I do is recommend my clients swap socks out every 6 months or a year. They haven't listened to me yet. We've got one filter that's been in the water for 5 years so far, and it's still sorbing. That's another problem why I haven't chased this market much.
We've done some work with biochar, and in fact, we're working with biochar right now as far as removing bacteria from solutions. So when you go into these lakes, certainly nutrients are an issue, but there's likely pathogens or at least indicator organisms.
Yeah.
Is there any interest in looking at that, plus on kind of that'd be the benefit, but then the downside would be you take these socks that now potentially have elevated concentrations of E. coli or what have you, people put this in their garden or in their, vegetable crops, is there any concern or has been there any work that maybe you're transferring?
Yeah, to answer your question, the School of Mines, Colorado School of Mines, because I know there's other School of Mines in other states, they've actually done work for Denver Water, show we're more cost-effective at absorbing E. coli than their UV radiation system. But what they're doing there is they're doing biochar filters like in the Platte River where the runoff comes from the city and the dog, goes by ag areas. So they're just leaving it in situ. They haven't pulled it back out yet. But the one thing that I would mention is like what's in the blue-green ant? Microcystin. Yeah, studies have been done because when we pull the socks back out, we've absorbed all that. That totally disappears out of the water. But they've discovered if you just leave the char sitting there after so many days, everything's dead.
How does this work? You can remove both metal ion and also phosphate, is it? And the example I cannot see very clearly. You can remove
Look,
cadmium.
all I can tell you is we do a different process than anyone else. It's a slow paralysis at extremely high temperature in a vacuum for like 8 hours. And it's one of those things like you remember the T-shirt, you had a formula over here and then a miracle happens and you have a result. I can't even tell you why our stuff does what it does. I mean, we've been trying to study it and universities have been studying it. It pulls the stuff out.
I was going to say, I think the science, we know more about what biochar absorption, cations, but it's anions that is still a head scratcher. But
Yeah,
there's
well,
probably some microsites, some heterogeneities, and there's various mechanisms that have been proposed.
yeah, no, and we make it differently than other people, and we're at a temperature above where other people do for a lot longer and in a vacuum versus a non-vacuum.
All right, so we're going to move on, though. Thank you, James. James
Thank
will be
you.
around.